Hey everybody, this is John Boyum of the Let's Talk Beef podcast, coming at you today from Medora, North Dakota, spending some time out here with the family. We just went through Teddy Roosevelt National Park. I gotta say that if you ever get the chance to come out here, definitely do it. It's quite the place to see. We saw some bison, antelope, and wild horses. First time I've ever seen them, so that was kind of cool. But definitely a very beautiful place. So if you get the chance, like I said, check it out. So anyways, the podcast coming today is I got the opportunity when I was in Georgia in June to sit down with Jarrod and Becca Creasy of 920 Cattle and Company in Statesboro, Georgia. I gotta say, we had a mutual friend that hooked me up with these guys, and they did not disappoint by any means. They're quite the couple. Glad I got to meet them, got to interview them, got to spend some time with them. They have a lot of motivation behind them, a lot of drive, a lot of very neat ideas, and I'm excited for them, and I'm excited to see where they go and where they can take their operation. It's quite the place. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. It's a lot of fun talking with them, and if you like the last one, you'll definitely like this one. But before we get to the episode, quick, I gotta give a shout out to my sponsor, Casper Enterprises, Dave Casper of Rushford, Minnesota. A friend of mine back home said he wanted to become a sponsor because he's really behind us. So I appreciate it, Dave. Dave is what I would call a organic, all-natural agronomist type. He knows his plant biology. He knows nutrients, deficiencies, all that in the organic, all-natural world. It's amazing listening to Dave talk about things. He really knows his stuff, and I know lots of success stories that he's had helping guys get through tough times with their organic and all-natural crops. So if you need any help with your organic, all-natural agronomy, just give Dave a call. He's a little old school, doesn't have a website or nothing. He still likes to talk to you over the phone. So Dave's number is 507-458-7659. So if you got any trouble with that type of stuff, give Dave a call, and he'd definitely be able to help you out. So thank you to Casper Enterprises for being a Let's Talk Beef podcast sponsor. And so now here's Jarrod and Becca Creasy. So do enjoy. Thanks. I am in, what is this, Statesboro?
Mm-hmm.
Statesboro, Georgia, with Jarrod and Becca Creasy. And Jarrod, take it away.
So we are a first-generation family farm. We started in 2014. 920 was formed in 2014 after our September 20th marriage. And we started out having cattle that we had acquired over the years, working and then purchasing some of our own cattle after our marriage. And from there, we just kind of started growing our business. We started out in the purebred genetics and started doing a little bit of hay for other farmers around the community and around the area. And then from there, we ventured on into the fence business and kind of got started building fence for other farmers and all that. And I guess to take it back a little farther, I'll let Becca do that since I clearly messed that up. But
You're doing good. Keep going.
And then from there, from the fence business, we became a fully integrated farming operation on our beef side to where we were able to acquire a butcher facility. We are now a federally inspected plant to where we can sell across state lines and nationwide.
Or out of the country.
Or out of the country as well.
Okay.
So we're doing that, and we raise our own steers from our own cattle genetics and carry them all the way from the pasture to the plate. We're a conventional-based farming operation. Everything stays on grass, but of course is grain finished once it meets the weight that we get ready to start finishing cattle at.
Mm-hmm.
And we work with other farmers in the area where we source swine, pork, and lamb to sell to consumers also. And I'll let Becca take it back a little farther than that or fill in the holes there.
Maybe not further, but just So our model was start with what we know, which was the cattle.
Yep.
And then from there it was how can we diversify to mitigate risk, and how can we kind of level out the ups and downs in the cash flow process for us. And so that's where we started, gradually branching out. Like you said, with the hay first and then fence. And it's one of those things where for us it was a natural progression. I think we learned very quickly that you can specialize in some things, and when you get too broad, you can mess up some things. So we spent a lot of time learning and a lot of time reevaluating, and we still are involved in each of those categories or segments of functions, as we call them, but to different degrees, basically. So, yeah.
So how did you end up here in Statesboro?
So me and Becca met. She was working at the college that I went to, and we never dated while
we need to
while
clarify
there.
that.
But that's when we first met, and
Yeah.
I took an internship out in Texas at a cattle operation, and went out there. They ran Hereford and Angus cattle, and went out there and worked managing their forage programs and such for them after college, after that internship,
And I was working at the time for the largest seeds and traits company in the world, and was in Texas for a conference, and that's how we had reconnected.
Okay.
And lost my train of thought. What was the question?
How did you end up in Statesboro?
Here.
Statesboro.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got sidetracked there.
Nope, that's fine.
But anyhow, reconnected in Texas, and then at the time we were kind of doing some custom work, ranching wise, and realized that me and Becca were going to get a lot more serious than just the dating aspect of it. And at the time, her job was a little bit more set in a certain area than her career that she was focused on at the time, and that brought me back to South Carolina, where I spent some time at the Yawns family farm, and spent some time at other farms and other areas around Georgia, and really just kept looking for land and kept looking for opportunity, and thought that coming back closer to where we had some connections and
The network.
networking.
Because you're from here, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. We're about 2.5 miles from where I grew up, where my mom and dad's farm's at. But just thought that it would be a good idea to come back and be within that network that was so established and so kind of close together already.
So did you grow up with cattle and all that stuff? Your
I
dad
did.
farmed and all that?
I did. We ran beef cattle, and my dad, when I was younger, he raised pigs as well. Sold out feeder pigs, whole farrowing operation and all that. And when hogs and pork started kind of going down in this area, he sold out of that and switched back over to beef, and just running cattle. But our main his main business there, my mom and dad's main business and entity was water well drilling for ag farmers, doing irrigation wells, residential wells, focused on the ag industry. So I was always around it, always surrounded with it, and just really started getting the itch from a young age.
And you're not from here.
And I'm not from here. So I grew up in Central Florida. A little different background, but still very similar. So still grew up in the beef industry. Both of my parents are ag teachers. High school ag teachers. Two of my sisters became ag teachers. Are no longer teaching, but I've got aunts and uncles that are teachers. My grandmother worked at a school. So yeah, so education is a very important piece of my life and how I was raised, especially in terms of how I interact with people and how I teach and learn, share things with others. I spent a year and a half working in higher education and realized although it was in my blood, it was not for me. So that's when I made the corporate transition. But from a family perspective, so we grew up always in the beef industry, but my granddad was involved in the citrus industry, and then there's a lot of produce in our family too. So
Okay. You're very diverse too.
yes, yeah. And so it was neat because growing up, I got to watch the process of managing a farm. It's from a kid's lens, so it's a little skewed. It seems all daisies and dandelions, and
Yep.
but we got firsthand experience of that also, kind of from the step right outside of the door. So it was neat to be able to watch and learn that side. And then working on the corporate side, have spent the last 8 years working in the vegetable seed division, and had learned a very significant amount of information. And thankfully, because of the role that I was in, the position I was in, and the relationships that I was able to develop, I got to experience a lot of these operations from a very intimate level. So I got to be involved with different produce operations across the Southeast, to the point where I was helping making business management decisions or crop recommendations or anything like that. So I think all of our background combined has kind of allowed us to foster what we're building.
Made for each other.
Yeah.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you guys get married in
2014.
2014. So 9/20 comes from September 20th. I was going to ask that. No, that makes sense. But I just would have thought about it.
Yeah.
Helps me stay out of trouble.
I'm sure. I'm sure. So you start out by buying this place where we're at right now. That's where it starts.
Had a lot of leased land that we had and still continue to have, and then this piece of property was our first purchase.
So how much were you running before you bought this?
Still about the same amount head-wise, still upper 200s or so, but really just this allowed us to really start and form and have a place to call home.
Yep.
Have a place to call ours.
Because you started out with the cattle and haying?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
That's
and,
what you started with?
Just kind of running out of rented land and running out of, options at that point. Buying land wasn't easy either. The family that owned this, she worked with us and still continuing to work with us on things, and that's huge for us. That allowed us to still continue to grow and do these other things.
And maybe as some perspective, so like Jarrod said, we had a lot of leased land and we had already purchased cattle on this land. But for us as young, at the time, in our mid to late 20s, and limited quote unquote experience for the farmers in this area that have been in business for generations. So we were very risky people in their minds. Regardless of our background, regardless of our education, regardless of our experience, we were considered risky. And so it took a lot, one, to be able to rent land, two, to be able to convince somebody that we needed to plant grass down instead of conventional row crops. And then three, to get a lease term longer than a year or two. So that was significant.
Just because it takes a year to establish grass.
A good grass
patch. Whether you're doing hay or trying to fix it to where you can graze on.
And to make the return on that investment.
That's correct.
Too.
That's correct.
So for me, I'm more on the emotional side. Having a homestead, this is for us and our business where we now have a headquarters and where we can establish kind of the foundation of what this business is, where we're going. This is where we can create the culture that we then will spread to the other places that we are operating in, to the other segments of our business that we're functioning in. So, and it's a place, we've got a 2-year-old little girl, Finley, and it's a place where she can grow up knowing everything that, she possibly can about what we've got to offer her. So, it's it's a very emotional purchase, although I think, moving, past this initial place, we look at land purchases and acquisitions as investment options and not emotionally. So this was our one emotional purchase, and then everything else is business. Right.
So when you started, how much hay are you running and how many cows you got when you start?
When we started, initially, we were only somewhere around...
Well, go ahead.
We were only around about 40 head cow-wise, give or take a few there when we first got started.
Yeah.
And hay-wise, it was around maybe 40 acres of hay. But everything that we were focused on was quality. Everything that we were focused on was being able to make the most per acre, per cutting, per year. And then the contract piece. It's not safe to go out and try to bale all this hay and say, oh, well, it'll get sold. That's not always the case. It's not always going to find a home. It's not always going to find a place to be fed. So we worked really hard with trying to find those folks to contract out that hay. And then from there on the acreage piece, we were able to start custom cutting and baling for other farmers, which really went back to our bottom line as far as being able for equipment payments and helping cash flow wise with fertilizer bills and things like that. It just allowed us to be a little bit more comfortable in our decisions as we continue to grow the business.
And the caveat to that is although we have a wealth of experience and background and a good set of roots behind what we do, 920 Cattle was started strictly with us. So we don't have any inheritances. We never, we paid for everything we've gotten. We've financed most of it.
Financed a lot of it.
Someday it'll hopefully.
Right. And so, we consider it a first generation operation because we've started from scratch. And so I think it took a lot of no's and a lot of trips to a dozen different lenders and a dozen different
equipment
companies,
dealerships,
and it was helpful for us early on, I think, if I could make a really good recommendation to anybody considering getting into farming, definitely do it, but make sure you have a good accountant and a good attorney and a good financial planner working with you, because I think that helps you avoid making bad decisions.
Yep.
So
was it always just beef and grass? Like, why no row crop? Like, that just never interested you?
I ran, growing up, I'd helped some local guys right here that we grew up next to that rented some family land from us and things like that, learned how to run a cotton picker, a peanut picker, and all that. And, tractor driving is peaceful. It's a good time. Don't get me wrong. Just put it in the basics for you.
Yep.
But to me, row cropping is a lot more risky on the farming aspect than anything that we're doing. There is a lot to be said about, we know where our product is going when it hits the dirt. The row crop farmer, the traditional peanut, cotton, corn farmer, or peanuts and cotton around here mostly,
and soybeans,
that market fluctuates so much, and the loss and the potential for loss is a lot greater than what ours is.
Well, and what we could tolerate too as a new beginning.
That's correct.
Operation.
That's correct. Our upfront cost and our bottom line cost was a lot lower for what we started doing, and our input cost, was a lot lower with what we started with versus what it would have taken to become a row crop farmer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and in my opinion, from the economic side of it, it's a commodity business, and being in the beef business and now in the farm to table business, we can decommoditize meat in our niche marketplace. And so for us, that means higher returns. It means you set your own prices, you determine your own margins, and that's been more profitable for us than what we could put on paper otherwise for any other segment of the
Absolutely.
industry.
Absolutely.
So you're doing grass, forage,
Mm-hmm.
and cattle, 40 cows and whatnot. So now, how does that start growing?
The hay business really started growing just from the contracting piece. Quality is everything. So once you get out there with a lot of those folks that we were selling hay to, and the largest one at that time was probably someone that sold or someone that purchased, 3,500 square bales from us. That was huge in the beginning. And those folks got to talking to their friends, and then by word
How
of
many hay
mouth.
bales were you putting on? How many were you making a year?
In the beginning, we were probably sitting no more than 6,500 squares. Not a lot.
Little squares?
Little squares. Not a lot. That was all hand labor.
And little squares is all you'll find in the Southeast, really.
We love to get into the big square market, but Georgia's not quite there yet. But, that was huge for us. That was all hand labor. That was stacking on 2 wagons, getting them full, going to the barn, coming back the next day. We had it fixed to where we knew how many acres we could cut down to fill those 2 wagons, just to go back and unload and load back up the following day of baling. But it continued to grow and continue to grow, and then we got into the round bale world as far as trying to market and sell some of those things. Had some horse customers that were looking for those heavier bales, more tonnage to stick out there and to utilize. Then we got in with the University of Georgia, started selling hay to those guys at some of their bull test facilities and production facilities that they have. We have our dreams and have our goals. We've spoke with folks at Disney at their Animal Kingdom. This happened several years after we got started, of course, more recent, but we realize how many bales of hay, square hay, small squares that it takes to fulfill that contract, and one day we'll get there. It's going to take 600 irrigated acres of TIF 85.
How many bales you talking?
2 truckloads a day.
They go through 1,400 squares a day. Is our understanding of that. So that takes care of all the carriage horses and
is that that's just a one contract deal? They don't have a couple contracts?
They want one
supplier.
They want to deal with one person.
All the hay to be the same.
Mm-hmm.
They want all the hay to be consistent, and they want to only know that they're talking and dealing with one person instead of 5.
Yep.
Which is not uncommon, as we've learned in the
Right.
contract business. So,
Right.
Some people do really well in the hay business selling, right off the farm or feed stores even or whatnot. But for us, the hay contract business has been what's been profitable for us, because then we can produce to meet these targets and know exactly what our returns will be, know exactly what we need to put into it in order to get out what we need.
We're selling that premium product that when Mother Nature takes that away from us, we can still go out and find that premium product and fulfill that contract, versus being stuck with not such a premium product that we have to figure out how to move it.
Yep.
We've already got a home for it. We're not trying to make the best quality and get paid for the medium quality forage.
Which is hard. It's hard to do and hard to get to that point, but I think it's a matter of a good network base. And, Jarrod's got people that he can call and say, what do you think about this? Or what, is this a fair pricing structure? Or is this a fair model for this particular contract? And
I'd say for us, and the biggest help is I've got folks from Texas, New Mexico, all the way back up into the Carolinas, all the way up into Ohio that I can call and ask those opinions. We've got an opportunity right now to send every square bale of TIF 85 hay that we can put on the dirt. We've got opportunity to send all of it to Texas to one man. And that's huge for us. It makes you want to jump out and grow, but you got to be smart enough to know that you better ease into it. You better pray about it, and you better have those conversations about it and make sure that it's all going to line up and come together.
So now you've increased your hay forage business. You're adding more cattle, and you thought, hey, I have nothing else to do, so let's start fencing.
Well, it started. It's funny you say that. We joke we had nothing else to do, but in the dead of winter, there's not a lot going on.
Yeah.
Pretty slow.
So
When we started the fence business, I'd say that the cattle operation hadn't really taken off to quite the size yet. Because you got breeding season, calving season, and all going on during the winter months, and it really hadn't taken off to the point that it is now, to the scale that it is now size wise. But we had a hay customer that called us and wanted a fence, wanted some hay and wanted some fence.
And we had all the equipment. I mean, we put up our own fences, so we had the equipment, had the experience.
That made sense.
Yeah. You invested in the stuff, you might as well use it.
That's right. That's right. Help let someone else kind of help pay for it. It all goes back to the custom aspect in the hay business.
Yeah.
We've got all this nice equipment now, but we have a very small window in the southeast of baling hay. Very, very small. We have a lot of warm days, but the amount of rainy days we have provides just a very small window to be able to put up quality hay, dry hay. So to that point, we just carried that over to what's now our fencing business. We had all the tools, all the equipment, and pretty much could eliminate the labor out of it, other than using a pair of hole diggers every now and then. And it's not the end of the world. That's honest day's work. So we kind of jumped into that full-fledged, and word of mouth travels pretty fast. So
it started out just cattle fence?
Yes, sir.
Farm,
wood
deer.
rail fence is kind of, and then the deer fence we transitioned into. Becca being involved in the produce world, and on that side of the farming ag aspect.
With all the food safety regulations and all, and produce, a lot of these guys needed ways to keep wildlife out of the fields, especially as it was approaching harvest time. And so
it directly takes their margin out.
Yes.
We started working with a larger fence manufacturing company, fence material manufacturing company, and one of their sales reps, and was able to work with some stuff that they already had in place, and just kind of tweak it and make some adjustments here and there. And we've got a way to put up an electric fence now to eliminate wildlife in the fields up to about 90%. 90 to 95% is what the elimination is. And instead of it costing $12 to $14 a linear foot to put up this high fence that you see a lot of places, we can drop that price down to about $2. Wow. So it makes it very affordable. And not just for the produce guys. A lot of these cotton farmers now that are going out, they're having to replant 3 or 4 times, not because of the weather, but because of deer. Because as soon as a sprout comes up, they're going out there and mowing nothing, leaving nothing but the stubble. In southeast Georgia, you drive by a field on a cool evening during the summer months or early June when planting's going on, it's nothing to count 30 deer within a quarter mile of driving down the highway. And that is very, very destructive and pretty much a nuisance to most farmers.
So I guess if you said it, I missed it. Did you come up, this deer fence that you guys are doing now, did you come up with that, or did somebody else develop that? It
was something that was tried in Alabama first. We can't take full claim over it by any means. But it was something that was started in Alabama. A cotton farmer over there tried it, did a trial with it, and did really good. And what we had to do for us and the soil type that we have that was a little different than in Alabama, we had to make some tweaking as far as grounding and charger size and corner placements and stuff like that, just wire adjustment height.
So what's unique about this fence?
It's all about depth perception.
Okay.
So it's 2 runs of fence.
Okay, it's 2 runs. Yep.
Instead of one solid tall fence, high fence. Is 2 runs of fence. The outside is designed to keep hogs from entering the property or entering the field.
And it sits there's 2 strands.
3
strands that sit where?
They sit somewhere around about 36 to 38 inches off the ground, and then it drops down from there. 2 of those being hot, 1 of them being a ground wire. And then the piece that keeps the deer out is the depth perception piece. So offset about 42 inches inside the field is a taller fence that's standing somewhere around about 60 inches or so at the top wire. And deer just have a hard time judging what that distance is, or if they can even jump in between to go under it. So their depth perception in wildlife is just not that great, or they just don't understand what they need to do to get over it. That 5 to 10% that you might have of deer getting in the field, if a hog gets in, you've got some type of problem with your electrical system or something going on. But a lot of times hogs can smell electricity from that standpoint and kind of deter away from it. That what we've seen down here work for us on the feral hog aspect. But a deer, most of the time, if they try to jump it, they'll get tangled in it. And it does have an electric fence hot box on it. And they're hunting a way to get out. Mm-hmm. They're not worried about eating the crop. Yeah. The tracks that you see will be around the perimeter of the fence on the inside of the field, but they're trying to find a way to get out. And that's that 5 to 10% that you'll see tracks inside of that field. And a lot of times you have to go and open up your gates and run them out, more or less, try to get in them and push them back around to where they get to that gate or where they can return back. Wow. So, it's all about helping the farmer find a cheaper aspect and a more affordable aspect to protect his crop or her crop, just to be able to cut costs and get the most out of it.
I didn't even think about that. So do you have feral hogs here? Is that a problem?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's a really big problem
they will
in the
tear
southeast.
Up a field in a heartbeat.
Hay fields, row crop fields, pretty much anything and everything. They'll tear it up.
So you see them around here quite a bit?
We don't have any on this farm here.
Okay.
Place over in Scriven County's got a fair amount of them. And it does become a cost factor. $2 a linear foot is still a lot of money when you get to fencing in 100, 200, 300 acre tract.
Yep.
A lot of folks still have the hunting aspect that they'll go hunt them and do that. We don't necessarily have the time to be able to go and hunt and do at night or late in the afternoons with everything we've got going on. So we just try really hard to push our fence aspect and see if we can move forward with that.
Well, yeah, I don't even know how to handle hogs. So I think it'd be like, your initial thought was like, oh, it'd be cool to just have hogs run around and shoot them and all that, but I'm sure it just, yeah.
And they reproduce very rapidly.
Yeah.
So
they can, it's just like a domestic hog. They raise anywhere. I think a feral hog and a rabbit are a lot alike because they can raise probably 2 or 3 litters in a year, and those litters consisting of anywhere from 6 to 12 at a time.
So is there people around here like trapping them and like that's their business and doing all that too?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. A lot of folks do that part-time or seasonal kind of thing. A lot of farmers will go and do that part-time, especially during the off-season. They'll plant some type of grazing out in the field and kind of hoax them out there and trap them that way. But, you're not necessarily solving that problem by doing it because you're still inviting them out into that field to where you're going to plant a crop the next year.
So now you guys do move into some commercial fences?
That's correct.
How did that come about, or how did that go?
It went well. I guess it came about just stumbling upon us. We were contacted about giving some quotes on some jobs that had came up commercially wise.
like government, county jobs, DOT jobs, different, and there's, especially in this part of the country, there's not a ton of fence companies. There's a few, but it's hard to come by a good quality fence company, I think. So once you start putting up fences, people will make note, I think. So that's how we got some of those invitations to bid out jobs.
We're finishing up a job now. It isn't necessarily a commercial piece of it, but on the ag side, it was 28,000 linear feet. More or less, we went in and set up and built the whole design, the whole farming aspect on a 130 acre row crop field. The gentleman went in and planted grass, and we went in there and kind of built his whole facility for him. those are the things that we really like and we really enjoy, just because that shares that same passion that we have for the ag industry and the cattle world. But the Department of Transportation jobs, the county jobs, things like that, the more business to business that we can do instead of opposing to that, dealing with just anybody that calls, I guess, you're sitting a little better, making your money, getting paid. You're sitting in a little better position that way.
We've done quite a bit of residential work also, which, as we were talking earlier, it's easy dealing with other ag producers. It's relatively easy dealing with other businesses, but it's a whole nother spectrum when you're dealing with homeowners who have no ag background or don't technically know the right ways to put up a fence, and so there's just some nuances. Yes.
It's been fun.
Some challenges, and so back to the commercial piece. So we're working with developers and construction companies and contractors to subcontract out different pieces of it. So that's been one of those things that's been helpful with the cash flow side and helpful with managing ins and outs and the financing pieces of the company.
And that's to just put it out there, the fencing side, that's been something and a blessing within itself. Just like Becca had said with the cash flow piece, it just makes things a lot easier. Things aren't quite as tight. It allows us to be able to grow at a faster pace, but it still allows us to do the things and be around the things that we love and are passionate and enjoy within that beef industry, within the ag world and farming aspect.
Because this fencing thing obviously took off, so is it your biggest aspect of what you're doing now? And do you got one crew, two crews, or how many? So
in terms of headcount and payroll, so on the farm side, we actually have a summer intern. So we are on the farm. We've got one more full-time person on the farm and an intern. And then on the fence side, there's 14 people on payroll. Some are full-time regulars, some are part-time, some are season. It just kind of depends on the business cycle. And then on the butcher shop side, which we haven't talked a lot about yet, but there are 5 employees on that payroll too. So quite a bit of people.
We run 2 crews most of the time.
Okay.
That's what we want to do and try to stay with. It doesn't always work that way. Labor is one of the hardest things from a farming aspect, on the farm, off the farm.
General.
I see you got a sign there out on the road.
Yep, yeah. Always hiring, always looking for the next best guy or next best young lady.
Yep.
One of the best things that we ever did was hire a couple of young ladies, and you pull up somewhere and a young woman gets out carrying a set of postal diggers. We live in the South. You see them work, and they're taught to work hard growing up. My sisters were taught to work hard. Everybody that I know growing up, they were taught to work hard. But a lot of times, a lot of folks look at a young woman and say, well, they'll do good somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Well, quite frankly,
they've been some of our best hires.
They've been the best hires that we have made, some of the best that we have made. And it's going to be hard to beat that. And that's the other thing is folks see that or see them get out of a truck or whatever, and they'll get out there and get just as dirty and work just as hard. And I have a lot of respect for that because the mentality of South Georgia and the southeastern United States is a lot alike in the rural areas.
And women are
women
seen and not heard, and women belong in the
right.
kitchen and at home, and
it makes us feel good that we can do that aspect, but kind of on a different note, but still that talking about like the payroll side, the employment side, probably one of the biggest accomplishments that me and Becca really enjoy is knowing that we provide for so many families. What we're doing here, and I don't mean selling beef, I mean the families that work for us, the employees we have. It just the feeling of knowing the accomplishments that we're actually providing for those families we're allowing them to be able to make a living. And that's huge for us. That's really important for us, and something that we hold dear to our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
So we touched on it, but you have another business on top of all this. So you now have a butcher shop.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come to fruition?
So we, with the cattle business that we were in, we started selling whole halves and quarter beef. And there is a, at the time, 68-year-old state inspected butcher facility about 45 minutes north of here. And nowadays there's maybe a dozen like that in the state of Georgia, and
Where
probably
they used to be in every town.
Yeah, and probably not many more than that in the southeast. And so that's where we were going to process for our meat business. And we had intentions and had hopes and big dreams of, having a restaurant one day, or having a retail front and doing the true farm to table segment. And we just didn't really know how that would look, and because we were so wrapped up in all these other things that were going on, that was just a distant.
You do have a lot going on.
We do, and because of that was just a distant dream. Like, that was just a long-term 10-year plan kind of idea, or even retirement idea.
Somewhere in the midst of that, you got a kid too.
Yes, yeah. There's a whole lot of other things that were happening personally in the midst of all of this that kind of influenced greatly those decisions that we were making. And so it got to the point, the butcher facility is called Freeze Frozen Foods, and it's been in the Freeze family at the time, like I said, for 68 years. And when we were going up there, and at one point Mr. Bobby, who's 64 years old now, maybe mid-60s, had said, we thought jokingly, hey, well, if you're interested in buying, here's an opportunity. And so we're like, oh yeah, right, like, that's not even feasible. Like, thanks, but no thanks, and so
good one.
Yeah. And we went up there, we went home, and we kind of pondered it, and we're like, wow, that's really cool, because that would line up with what we're dreaming about. But really, how is that going to work out?
Yep.
And so we went back up there, and he mentioned it again, and mentioned it again, and mentioned it again. And so the more times he was mentioning it, the more I think it kind of was setting in for us that this could really potentially be an option, like a good opportunity. And again, thinking about diversifying your risk, like, that would be one way to do that. And so he kind of told us what he wanted for it. It has been in his family for 3 generations, and it was one of those situations where his son, who had planned to take it over, had passed away about 15 years ago. And so it was a very emotional decision for him also. And and he had reassured us throughout the process of the acquisition that he kind of felt like this was God's way and his son's way of protecting the legacy that their family had built. And so, having those conversations really cemented in our mind that this was the right thing to do. This was an industry, a subsection of our industry that doesn't exist very heavily, and it's not very prominent, but it's a very lucrative business if you allow it to be. So we acquired it as a custom butcher facility, meaning we processed for other producers. So if you have, if you raise 1 hog a year or 1 calf a year, we can process it. If you have a 1,200 acre head farm and you want to sell meat off the farm, we can process whatever you've got. So that's what it started out as. And then as we closed on the business, so we had been up there, Mr. Bobby thankfully let us kind of get our feet wet a little bit, and we spent some time up there working, learning before we actually committed, which was very nice to be able to have that opportunity. And it turned into, after we closed, he thankfully has kind of stuck around with us, and we were able to retain all the employees that were with him at the time. And he has since taught us everything he knows, the secret recipes to the sausage blends. There's an in-house smokehouse that we have learned all the ins and outs of. That the smokehouse in itself, there's not any other one like it in the Southeast. So we even have other processing facilities that will send meat to us to be smoked and cured.
It didn't come with a manual, like, here, just read it?
No. Maybe with how to call the phone number to Bobby and figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
That was nice of him to stick around.
Yes.
And I'm sure it was a part of the way of him saying goodbye.
Yes.
And just being there and showing you guys how to do stuff.
You're exactly right, because right after we closed, which was in the 1st of December, and he probably spent the first 2 months after we were there at the butcher shop every day, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Like, he was there with us the whole time. And, we would never push him out. Like, we wanted him to be there, but at the same time, we knew he wanted to, like, he was planning to retire, and they had all these plans of traveling and doing, and, so at the same time, we wanted him to be able to enjoy his retirement and not be worried and stressed about being up here. And so he gradually started, he'd come in 4 days a week and then 3 days a week. And so now he'll come in, he'll just buzz around it. He'll come in for 15, 20 minutes and hang out for a few minutes.
Look at the cooler.
Check on things. We carry glass bottle Cokes up there, so he'll get a glass bottle Coke and put some peanuts in it and have a little snack. And then when he's done, when he thinks everything's fine, and he'll check the cut sheets, and he'll check our processes, and make sure that things look good and we're on schedule with things, and that there's not any carcasses that have been hanging too long. Or he'll be very quick to tell you, this cow needs to be cut next, this one needs to be cut next. So once he's satisfied with where things are, then all right, I'll see you tomorrow, or I'll see you next week, or so.
Did you have any background in meat butchering, any of that? Like, did you have any idea?
We did.
Yeah, not from a business management side, not from an education side. Like, I never took any meat science classes in college. I did take animal science classes, and Jarrod has animal science background. I had spent some time in some of the more commercial butcher plants or processing plants in the Midwest. And in 4-H and FFA did, in Florida we had a program called Hog and Ham, where you got to raise a hog, take it to the University of Florida, go through the whole process of butchering and cutting and all that. So
I was well in Georgia doing the meats judging, and
FFA,
that's the thing about the beef world is, you kind of have that understanding as a whole, because that's part of the beef industry. The pounds on the plate, like we had talked about earlier, that's the big thing. That's important. You need to know how that process is, and kind of have that understanding from a rail on the carcass, a carcass on the rail.
So when you take it over, is it just other people's beef that you're processing, or is it
we have
hogs and sheep and all that too?
So we do beef, pork, lamb, goat, and then we will seasonally do deer. It has transitioned from where Mr. Bobby was doing 100% custom work for other people to now it's roughly 80% of the business is custom, and then 20% is stuff that we process of our own that we then sell retail. We go to farmers markets, we sell online, and
restaurants.
And restaurants and wholesale is the fourth component of that. So
how's the retail's part going?
It's one of those things. This is our first year in the farmers markets, and the farmers market has been very good to us. Honestly, it's a different clientele base than you typically would reach at a butcher facility, because it tends, and I am loving this crowd, but it's a very hippie crowd.
So you get a lot of questions.
Yes,
a lot of questions.
And a lot of misinformed customers, as you can imagine. And so the retail space from that side has been, one, very good from a sales perspective, but also very good from an education standpoint, because we've got 5 to 6 folks that will help us on the farmers market also, that are just part-time or just here for the farmers markets. And they have had, between all of us, we've had all of the questions, the whole gamut of questions that you could imagine. And so it's fun. It's interesting to engage with them. It's interesting to share our story, for them to put a face with the farm. And we've learned that the more consistent you are, the more they see you, the more approachable you are, the more trusting they become of you.
And your product.
And your product and your brand. And so the farmers market piece has then transferred over to the retail front, which is just out of the butcher facility. So the front part of the store we'll sell retail meats out of. And that, for a small segment, Mr. Bobby was already selling some stuff, but it was just pork. And now we're selling beef that we raise or beef that our partner producers raise, and then lamb and pork also that's partnered producer raised. And I think it's just the more people learn and the greater the spread is, the word of mouth goes, the more engagement we have and the more, the increase in sales we see. So it's one of those very gradual processes, and it's certainly not happening overnight as much as we wished it would. But it's been very good to us. We basically can move everything we process. So
that's good.
Yeah.
So restaurants and online, you said? How was that? I mean, did you have any restaurant background, or was that?
Nope. Nope.
That's been a big learning curve too from the restaurant side, just because once again you're dealing with a totally different clientele. Someone that we probably all enjoy and love as a foodie, but a chef. It takes a little bit to get in with them. It takes a little bit to be able to get your product in the door for them to be able to try it. They're just like us. I relate it back in the beef industry to a new feed company strikes up. We can look at the tag on a feed bag or nutritional value and all that, but that doesn't necessarily tell us what we really want to know without trying it. So I always relate that back to the chef piece, but Becca's done really well having those conversations and really getting our brand out there with those guys and gals.
How do you start that? You just give them free samples of stuff,
we're still kind of in that trial and error phase. What we have found, there's so many ways to go to market with a restaurant, with business owners, chefs.
Yep.
You could approach it from, and we have in some degree, so you can go directly to owners, directly to a chef. You can do it through their clientele base, so you can promote your product to a certain customer base who frequent certain types of establishments, and then say, hey, do you guys serve 920 beef, or do you guys have any of the 920 special cured bacon, or their special seasoned, special blended sausage or whatnot. So there's some push and pull through marketing methods. For us, what we think has been most successful is we target restaurants that are independently owned, that are more farm to table oriented, more concerned and more consumed by where their products come from, the local aspect. And so those are the types of restaurants that we approach. And we start off with, typically we will go eat there, and we will kind of,
a good start.
Yeah. But we joke about that, but so many people don't. They just will cold call or drop a sample off and have never been there, which, if I'm a business,
you don't know if they can prepare it or not.
Yeah.
They might not serve medium rare steaks, and
so
forget this one.
Yeah. So we'll go to a place a couple different times, try to get a feel for who the chef is, who the sous chef is, who the owners are, who makes those decisions. Is it management? Is it actually chefs? Is it owners? Who kind of makes those decisions? And then that's how we will determine the strategy to approach them. So sometimes it's a chef, sometimes it's an owner. We're working with the restaurant about an hour north of here, and it's strictly the owner's choice, but he's also an owner chef. So it just depends on the dynamics of the restaurant itself. So,
and the online, have you been selling online quite a bit, or?
We do. It's not one of the most, we don't have the most amount of sales from the online segment, but I think for us it's been helpful for customers to be able to go online and see, they have this, why don't we call them? Or we have the option where you can order online or order over the phone and pick up at certain locations like the farmers markets. And so we've seen that that's been pretty successful too, just to have those resources listed online that they can go and see. This is what they've got and this is what they can do. And this is Finley.
This is Finley. She's been running around giving hugs.
Can you say hey? No.
So speaking of, so now you're butchering your own beef, processing, selling it. So let's talk about the beef. Like, what's your herd dynamic? What are you doing with the cows? Like, what's your breed preferences? What are you trying to do there?
So from the beginning, we started out with, Brangus, Angus genetics. I had some Simmental cattle as well. And we were focusing on what did the best in the southeast with the climate, forage, something to provide the commercial cattlemen with the genetics to put the most pounds at the end of the day for him to make his most money. So what that's transitioned to now with the butcher facility and meat business for us, farm to table, is that the Brangus genetics, they seem to do really well in hot climates. Of course, that's that Brahman influence in those guys doing that for us. And then as well with the Angus quality of meat from that genetic side. And that put together really puts out a nice steak, a nice type of meat and quality of meat that stays consistent for us. And just does a really good job and has a really good taste with the way that we develop it, feed it out. With a grain diet after finishing, and just does really well on the forage that we're able to plant and grow here in the southeast.
So how do you so you're making calves? What are you doing? You putting all the calves through your feedlot, or how you do? What else are you doing there?
So we do a fair amount of embryo work. We've got some donors in house, and then we also buy embryos from other producers. The end game is still raising bulls and females to be able to sell and to be able to produce those higher superior genetics that do really well for other farmers as well as us here. But now owning the butcher facility allows us to really cull a lot harder based on genetics, based on phenotype and everything that we're really looking for in those purebred genetics to be able to build the herd, build the genetic potential within each breed that we have here. It allows us to cull harder and still make a profit or still make...
and it's a higher return. If we can keep them and feed them out, we have a higher return than if we were just to cull and ship out west. Well, even if you retain ownership and send them out on a pot load, we're still returning more by being able to sell the meat products.
Yep.
Yeah. So basically, this might answer your question a little more clearly.
I was trying to get back to it.
We try to retain roughly like the top 15% of the calf crop, bulls and females. Most of the females will go back into the herd. The bulls will typically be sold. And then the rest we develop for the butcher facility. So we develop with that intention.
So how many you're running? Would you say 250 cows
Roughly.
I mean, is that where you want to be, or is adding more just depends on what opportunities for land present themselves?
The land piece is a huge part of where we're at right now, and why we're sitting and why we're spread 3 counties wide, cattle operation wise. I think from pasture to pasture is about an hour and 15 minutes. And thank the good Lord for good help and good people that work for us. But we want to grow. We will continue to grow. Our meat business is growing steadily, and our bull and female business sale-wise is growing steadily as well. So when the potential presents itself, absolutely. The number, I guess, that we really want to sit at is somewhere between that, for me, somewhere between that 800 to 1,000 head count, somewhere along in there. Now, we're a long ways out from that. Yeah. But being able to do what we're doing by culling what we're culling and be able to get the genetics that we really want and to push, it's going to help us a lot when we can finally get to that point of growth and find that land and be able to move forward with everything. It'll really help long term.
So the bulls and the heifers, is that all private treaty right now, or?
Yes, sir. We've got some opportunities to put them in different sales, cooperator sales. There's a southeastern Brangus sale, bull sale. There's a couple of sales down in South Florida that we could put stuff in, but right now it's just private treaty off the farm. We've got several folks that pretty well hold interest in it yearly, so it's not something we have to really hunt and move bulls with that way.
Mm-hmm. So where's your feeding out facility? Where's that at?
It would be in Scriven County.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's
about 45 minutes from here.
Big feedlot, or what's that?
No, sure, it's all on pasture.
It's all pasture. Okay.
Yeah,
With
that's
bulk feeders.
bulk feeders in them,
Okay.
depending on what stage they're at, weaning wise and stuff like that. They get hand fed. Docility's huge for us, just because those guys that have 30 to 40 head, most of those folks are older. They need something that's not going to be aggressive. They need something that they can be around and not ever get hurt. So docility's huge for us as well. But they stay on pastures and have access to a buffet and that self feeder.
How long are they out there?
Bulls get sold anywhere from 15 to 20 months, something like that, long yearlings. And then we carry steers until they're between that 1150 and 1300 pound mark is kind of their time frame. And of course that varies by genetic makeup and things like that. So,
has anything surprised you in the processing? Like you thought a calf would do really good and just wasn't there what you thought, or was going to do really bad and was really good?
Absolutely. That's every day.
Every day.
Every day. You get really excited about one that you think will do really well, and then 3 months down the road you realize that you just wasted a lot of money on trying to feed something that probably shouldn't have made it past.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which is the cool part about being integrated like we are, is you get to see and you get to know exactly how things perform and what your genetic decisions are resulting in.
You get to see it with your eyes instead of on paper. We had talked about earlier as far as sending stuff out west. You get your data back, but here we get to see it firsthand.
Yeah.
If we take a load of 10 steers to the facility to get butchered, we can go back up there that afternoon, look at them on the rail, and then we can go back the next week and look at them
taking
after
selfies and put them on Instagram and just going crazy.
Well, that piece of it's been challenging because animal activists and folks like that, they really look for things like that, and they look for the opportunity to strike you down. And the most recent case, they look for that opportunity to really hinder you and hurt your operation or hurt our industry that we work so hard to protect.
And we try, though, even with that in the back of our minds, like we try to be very transparent about what we do and how we do it and why we do it. And so we joke about sharing pictures, but we do. We do post pictures of carcasses on the rail and what things look like. We're more cautious about
we're cautious about who we let take pictures as well.
Inside.
Yep.
Well, and we're cautious about how we frame the narrative around the conversations too. So,
you can't go. This was a hard lesson for me. You have to watch your terminology. You can't go in somewhere. On Tuesdays.
Semantics matter. Semantics matter.
On Tuesdays, that's our
Butcher day.
You have to make sure you think about the terms that you use when you go and talk to folks. Just down at the local bank, you have to be careful how you word things because a lot of folks just aren't as familiar with what you're talking about as what you might think.
Jarrod's alluding to, he used to walk around saying, "Oh, it's kill day, but you can't walk into any random place that,
You can't walk in and have a conversation with a banker that's not from the rural areas of Georgia. It came from the city somewhere and say, "Oh yeah, it's kill day today. Well, Tuesdays and Thursdays might be our kill days, but when we kill them, well, you can't continue using that.
Language.
That biggest thing is that's a hindrance or a bad image is painted in their mind, I guess. The terminology, that's correct. But I learned that pretty quick.
Going along those lines with the farmers market, how do you get questioned with like grass-fed, organic, all that stuff?
Yes.
So like, how do you handle that, or what are your thoughts on those different aspects?
So we, and whenever we started this season, when we've got our folks that work at the market, and so we spend a little bit of time going through with them in particular. So you have this spectrum of individuals, and you have your far left-winged and your far right-winged, and there's probably 5 to 10% on either side. And those, in my opinion and in my experience, are the people that no matter what you tell them or what kind of emotional connection you can make with them, you're not going to change their opinion. So you just let them be, you let them have their opinions, they're entitled to it, that's that.
Yep.
And we have found that it's that middle 80% that you have the ability to influence. And so, our approach has been, if a customer comes to you and asks, are you grass-fed? We only want grass-fed. Well, what are you familiar with about grass-fed? Why is that a concern for you? And then if we understand what their concern is or what the root of the situation is, it's easier for us to address it. So we can tell them all day long that we are a conventional program. Everything is on grass. It has access to forages. It has, they are finished on grain. We can provide them all of the information with how we operate, except it doesn't matter until it comes down to understanding what their fears are or what their concerns are. And then if you can address those concerns, then you're making progress. And if you can correlate what they're concerned with what you're doing to prevent that concern, then you just meet them in the middle, and then you can find a compromise or a balance. Mm-hmm. So that's been how we've approached it, and it's worked. So
that's good. How do you think things in the country are going with that aspect? Like, do you see more of this, what you're doing, beginning to end, popping up more, or the more conventional, is that big conventional feedlot in the Midwest, is that going to continue to be there? Or where do you see things going?
My opinion is, in order for our world to sustain itself, we have to have the big side of it, the big commercial corporate side of the beef industry, of the produce industry, of the timber industry, any industry. That's what we need in order to feed our world. I think there's opportunities for niche markets like what we've done, and in my opinion, it's all ag. It's all ag supporting ag, and so it's my opinion, I don't know that our world could sustain itself with small integrated places like us. I think it requires a larger scale. That's not to say that there's not ways that could be improved or changed, or the dynamics of that segment of our industry could be altered or influenced by consumer demands, but from the overarching structure of it, I think it's necessary.
I agree. I think that we'll have to keep that to continue the way that our world is growing, the way that we'll have to be sustainable and be able to do and keep up with that growth. I do think that a lot of changes will be made from consumer demands. I think that is something that affects everyone from the word go. But I think that's going to be huge moving forward within the next 10 years. I think there will be a lot of changes made as a whole.
Gotcha.
I also think, though, there's a lot of, although consumers have a voice and have a say, they narrate a lot of the conversations that happen around our industry. But I think something that we oftentimes forget about or maybe overlook is the influence that other non-industry organizations have, such as McDonald's or Subway, or all of these food service and other retail outlets that have the buying power and the purchasing power within the meat industry, that they have a lot to say. And some of them sit on NCBA boards and committees, and so they're integrated into the industry. They have a big say in what happens in our industry. And so I think it's finding a balance between what consumers tell our industry versus what consumers purchase at these businesses, and then how that's translated into our industry, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Wow. You are a deep thinker. That's awesome. I'm sure that company you just left is pretty upset you left. I'm sure this guy is super happy. So what's the future hold here? What's the dreams? What's the aspirations? Where does this go? Where does it go? I mean, what do you want to leave?
I'll preface it with, we have books of dreams. We have lots of things to dream
I think,
about.
you know, from my aspect, we're both dreamers. You know,
Which is good and bad.
right.
I know
we have
exactly where you're
to
coming from.
we have to surround ourselves with folks that complete us, that complete our business.
Which
and
sounds kind of
hold-
cliche when you say it like that, but
it holds our
Some
business
sometimes
together.
cliches are what's
yes, yeah.
You know, it really makes us complete. Because some of the things we dream are a little real unrealistic, and one day it'll still happen. But when I guess if I say unrealistic, it's unrealistic tomorrow. It's just not going to happen tomorrow. No matter how bad and how hard we put and dedicate our time to it, it's not going to happen that fast. Dream wise, you know, the sky's the limit. We had talked about the piece with the pork and lamb earlier, and being able to supply that. You know, that's something that we'll look into and definitely think about and see what that looks like for us.
I want to own a restaurant and or food truck. Food truck and then a restaurant probably.
Yeah.
One thing on top of that we're really close to is having the farm to table, being fully integrated.
Have a restaurant here on the farm, do an agritourism situation.
That is where we want to be. So an opportunity presents itself to have the conversations about our industry and to talk about the beef industry, the ag industry, just really anything. When you have the opportunity to talk about it and share that with someone, whether it's your story or facts or really anything, take that time to share it. Take that time to whether it's a 20-second conversation or something that turns into 30 minutes. Take that time to share the world of ag, the beef industry, to a consumer, to another person that might not have the full understanding of really what goes on.
And for us, I think that's translated into farmers markets, restaurants, all the direct consumer, even on the fence side, working with residential clients directly. I think there's always opportunities. So it's just the education piece.
On the dream side, we want to have our own sale, our own production sale. We want to be able to grow what we call our cooperator group. We want to be able to help other farmers market their beef while still, building our brand, their brand. The opportunities are endless with everything that we're doing. It goes back to the hay piece. One day we'll sell hay to Disney. It probably won't be in the next couple of years, but one day we'll do that. And we'll do whatever it takes from a business side to make sure that the legacy we're building continues. If our little girl chooses to come back to this, she's welcome to. If not, it'll be here for those who want it. It'll be here for whether they're family or not. If somebody takes an interest in it, it'll be here for them. It's done so much for us, and that will be one of our ways of giving back. Of having that side.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of people that have been very integral in getting us to where we are without, outside of the financial piece. So, we've had great mentors. We've had people that have given us opportunities to make purchases like our homestead here and like the butcher facility. And so I think for us it's important to be able to share that knowledge with other people, especially new and beginning farmers or people interested in getting into the industry, whether they have a background in it or not. And so I think that kind of goes back to Jarrod's point of being accessible or providing a way to be accessible to other producers in similar situations. Even, we can't obviously invest financially in other businesses, but we can invest our experiences and our knowledge in other people and in other businesses.
Our time, that's huge. There's ways to help one another. You just have to think outside of the box. It's not always about money.
Yep.
You just have to think outside of the box.
So what, you already kind of talked about this just a little bit, but you said a good accountant, a good lawyer, and a good financial advisor. So what other advice do you got for people that want to do what you're doing?
You know, Jarrod tells this story about Sonny Perdue, who is now the USDA Secretary of Ag, and he's from Georgia, so he was our governor years back, and so we have known him through his Georgia connections and through different opportunities that we've had in the state. And he told, Jarrod was in D.C. last year, and they were having this conversation about people getting into the industry, and Jarrod asked Mr. Perdue what he recommended for new and beginning farmers, and he suggested to get a day job. And as new and beginning farmers, Jarrod, you can share your perspective, but I think it's a little offensive when this is what we're doing and somebody seemingly is discouraging it from happening. And so but
Oh, mommy.
yeah. But but even with that in mind, I did have a day job, so I was working in the corporate world, and we did have a sense of security in terms of health insurance and consistent payroll.
baby.
And so
No.
my advice, even though I spent a fair amount of time here on the weekends and in the evenings and all, is I think it's okay to have a day job, and it's okay to build slowly, and it's okay to not dive in 100% on day one, but to gradually work your way into it and to gradually make good decisions. Do you have an opinion, Finley? No.
I
Who's really in charge here, huh?
That's right. Finley runs this show.
I took offense to when he said that. We were sitting, there was around 25 of us in a leadership class at the University of Georgia. Took a 10-day trip to D.C., 7 or 10-day trip to D.C., and toured the Capitol and had all those experiences, being able to talk to legislatures and stuff like that and share our concerns and our message and really what was affecting our parts of the industry. And as Becca said, I knew Secretary Perdue from when he was governor here and had the opportunities to meet him then and to carry on a relationship, not on a personal level, but a recognizable level, that when we saw each other, he could put me in place to where I'd seen him previously or where he knew me previously. To that point, for him to say that, A, to a group of folks from his home state, B, to a person that is in their late 20s, that has hustled probably as hard as the unimaginable could think of hustling, to hear that come out of the Secretary of the United States Ag Department's mouth, it hurt my feelings.
Yeah, kick in the gut.
Everybody in our group just kind of stopped and looked at me because they knew that wasn't quite the answer I was looking for. To that point, as Becca stated, she had a day job. Since that conversation, I'd love to write him a letter and tell him thank you, because since then that has assured us and assured me and really helped me understand that as diverse as what we are, we technically do have a day job. Our fence business is our day job. Our hay business is our day job. Our cow business is a day job. When you break it apart, but the diversity has really helped us be able to do all of that. So, diversify. Find a way to be able to do everything you love, but find a way to make more money off of that opportunity. Whether it's, selling hay, but then going down to your neighbor's house and baling his 30 acres of hay. Or using your tractor to go bush hog somewhere else, or something along those lines. The opportunities are endless. But just don't take no for an answer. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the answer is no, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it.
Yep. Just means you do it a different way.
You find a way to do it. You use those 3 key people to help you find a way and understand a better way to do it. Reach out to those mentors, find out how they did it when they got started, whether they're 3 years older than you or whether they're 50 years older than you. Just because a gentleman's in his late 70s, he got started at one point in his life. And it's totally different economy-wise and world-wise back then, but a lot of ways are still the same. Hustle hard and keep your head down. One of my favorite little memes that you see on social media is the duck sitting on a pond. Stay calm on top, but hustle underneath. And that's huge. Keep everything together, but just make sure that every day you give it all it's got. And keep pushing, keep trying.
Great words. Well, do you have something to add?
No.
You sure?
I want to share about this and
Actually, that was going to be my next
Oh,
question.
cool.
I got two more questions, and one of them's about your what you're missing over there.
Well, even before that, you want to start.
So everything that we've done in almost 4.5
years. 4.5 years.
Almost 5 years.
Okay.
That's husband and wife right there.
And that being said, me and Becca got married, we started all of this. We started doing everything that we're doing gradually, and we jumped in pretty hard, pretty fast, and that's our personalities, that's our spirit, that's our trust in God, He shares things with us before we recognize it. We'd been looking for land, couldn't find any affordable or something that we wanted, and we found out we were pregnant, and that was so exciting. And then we started looking for land even more, pushing harder, and a home that was safe, a home that wasn't a 1915 farmhouse that had been remodeled and painted over and all of that. Nothing's wrong with that, just something a little safer to raise a family in. We went about 4 months, and we lost our first baby. We had a miscarriage, and that was tough. You lose a lot of faith with something like that because you blame someone, there's a lot to point fingers and all of that, but in the end you realize that you trust Him, you trust in God, and you give everything to Him. God be the glory. And from there, we went through that whole process of that pregnancy and
grieving and the loss and the trauma
in South Georgia, nobody talks about that.
Yep.
It goes back to the culture of down here. Once we started going through that, and folks at church found out, and folks around the community found out, we found out it was something that was more common than what we thought. We thought it was something that we did wrong.
Yep.
That whole grieving process and that whole process of going through the spiritual piece and the faith piece and just coming closer within our marriage, it's just unreal how God brings you to it, brings you through it, but makes you stronger in the end. From there, the light came back at the end of the tunnel. We found this place that we're sitting at today, that was huge for us. To be able to find that and coming out of that grieving stage of that point in our life where we were still baling hay, we were still running cows, I was still going and doing AI work for other people, and then to think of doing AI work and breeding a cow, and I'm not saying you you don't relate your wife to a cow, but when you think
But he
about
did.
everything,
He did.
when you think about everything that you know how to do,
My wife's calf twice. So.
Yeah.
when you think of everything that you know how to do, but you can't have a job, that brings you back down. It makes you humble. It just makes you be thankful for what's in front of you. And I guess 4 months went by. 3 months, not even that.
Yeah.
60 days maybe went by. Lo and behold, we found out we were pregnant again.
We did not want to be. We were still dealing with our first loss and still reeling from that. And so it was a very different experience. So the first one, you're excited, you're happy, you're thrilled. The second one, you're fearful, you're concerned, you're worried, you're afraid, you're all of these angst of emotions, yes, on the other end of the spectrum here. So
the biggest thing is that you think to yourself, well, what's going to happen when we lose this one? What's going to happen when something isn't right? You have an unhealthy child, or we're gonna go through this whole process again that we just got over. And we were very cautious with everything. We didn't tell anyone at all.
We were 15 weeks pregnant.
And then at that point, we didn't share it with anyone outside of our family for a long time.
We were 22 weeks when we even made it public, so we were past the halfway point when it was obvious.
Right.
when I couldn't disguise my
Becca.
right.
And once we got past that halfway point, we started to celebrate. We started to, we were thanking God every day for the blessing that we had in front of us and the opportunity again. But we finally became okay with it. We finally became acceptant that we were given another chance. At that point, we had made this purchase. We had remodeled this home during our slow time. We're not house remodelers anymore.
You're not the next chicken job.
No. We're not going to do that. But we went through that whole piece, and it came one night right at the end of March. We were sitting here in the living room. Niece and nephew was over. We were playing games, board games and stuff, and me and Becca were doing some things on the computer. And we're very interactive and very full of life even when we're working and picking and all that. And I could tell she wasn't comfortable. Becca's had some issues, some high risk issues, but everything had been okay up to that point with the pregnancy. And I could tell that she was uncomfortable in some way, and God love her, she's a hard-headed woman, which our little girl clearly picked up on, inherited or gained from that. But we go to the hospital, and her blood pressure was 200 over 125, and she shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Long story short on that piece is we finally made it to Savannah, to Memorial Hospital, and they stressed the importance that she should not be here any longer. Now we're back to the point of, well, here we are again.
And at this point, we're 27 weeks pregnant.
Yeah.
So we were told that when we got there, we were told that I will stay there until we have our baby girl.
This was the end of March. Needing to be put out fertilizer, needing to be cutting haylage and baleage, needing to do all this stuff on the farm. And we checked into Memorial, and we spent 10 days there with Becca in her own room. And at 28 weeks, as some of her organs began to shut down, she went in, and we had
They induced me.
and tried to induced her, tried to have a natural birth, and it just wasn't happening fast enough. So
into an emergency C-section.
and we had a 28-week, 2-pound, 5-ounce little girl.
Wow.
We stayed in the NICU. I stayed in the hospital another week as my organs began to. So it was preeclampsia that evolved to HELP syndrome is what the results were, but to the point where it was either my organs shutting down or hers shutting down. So that's what rushed the emergency C-section. So we spent 5.5 weeks in the NICU. We came home when she was 3 pounds, 11 ounces, the tiniest baby to leave the NICU. So she did really, really well, but she, started in a little incubator, and it was 8 days before we could even hold her or take her out of her little home. So that experience in and of itself was, just the trauma associated with a high-risk pregnancy, having a child born that prematurely, the risk associated with it, the potential for other developmental delays, cognitive delays, physical delays. All of those things were factors that we were, consumed by. But she's, you can hear her running around. She's great. She's healthy. She just turned 2 in April. And she, we've done physical therapy, occupational therapy. The girl does not need speech therapy. She is very skilled in talking. They say she gets that honestly from her dad. So that was in April of 2017. Come home, get acclimated to not only life with a newborn, but life with a premature newborn, and all of the...
You're used to having a nurse there by our bedside with monitors, and you come home and you deal with that for 5 weeks, and you're more or less peeking over the edge of the bed, looking at her, making sure that she's okay, and she's not moving because she's sleeping.
So then we had this little transition period, April, by the time we were home in May, June, July, August, we start getting a sense of reality again, and, it took a while to even leave the house, to have a conversation with a normal person. It just was all consuming. And Jarrod in November 11th, was this place, our homestead here. There used to be an old railroad that ran through the front part of the farm.
Right.
And so they were putting up fence on him. My niece and nephew were with us again, and we're putting up fence with a post driver, a hydraulic post driver, and because the ground was so hard where the rail beds were, that post wasn't driving, so it was like 10 o'clock in the morning. Finley was with my mother-in-law at the house. I was in town running errands. It was a Saturday morning, and they were going to take a break and just go get a snack from the side store, and I get a call from my mother-in-law that says, go to the hospital right now. And just, there were no details to it, just get to the hospital. So I go to the hospital, and I'm waiting, still have no clue who's coming, don't know what's coming, I don't know anything at this point. And long story short, the tractor was turned off. They were getting down, off the tractor, going to get a snack, and Jarrod had went to pull the post out, and as a result, something about the post hit the back of the hydraulic driver and dropped the hammer on his hand. So Noel, Jarrod's dad, was at the church right next door, and was in this big service well truck, for pumps and all, and I'm still patiently waiting at the hospital. My heart's racing. I'm not sure what's about to happen.
Yeah.
And here comes Noel in this big F3 or 450 truck with the service bed on it, literally skidding on 2 wheels, turning into the hospital. And I see Jarrod getting out, and he's literally like, I'm showing you, but you can't see on the podcast, but, just...
He's woozy.
Yes, and he's, you can just hear the pain and hear the agony in his voice, and, then of course my heart's racing, my adrenaline's pumping. I still don't know what's happened because he's holding his hand. He had gloves on, so he's holding his hand in his lap, and they finally get a wheelchair, and I run back in the hospital, and I'm like, we need help right now. And we live in a slow-paced town, and people don't always respond very quickly. And
Yeah.
so once they realized what had happened, literally they just rushed him right back in. And he lost his pointer and his second finger, and then half of his ring finger. And at the hospital in Statesboro, they were more concerned about numbing the pain and dosing him up well enough to be able to transfer him to a specialist in Augusta. So I literally drove 112 miles an hour following this ambulance to Augusta, which was a little nerve-wracking in and of itself.
Sure.
But and we joke now because the drugs at the time, Jarrod was joking, because that's just his personality, was joking with the physician on call there, and he picks up his hand.
Those days you get in the hayfield and you got to work on a piece of equipment and it just gets real dusty, or you work in cows and your nose just gets full of dust.
Yep.
Well, he picks up his hand and it's limp, like finger. It's his
gloves off at this point.
His hand was. If we showed you we could show you X-ray pictures, but it's just shattered into pieces. Like there's not a single structure of a bone in his hand, in his fingers. And so he picks it up and it's flopping over, and he says, "Hey doc, do you think I'm going to be able to pick my nose with these fingers?" And the doctor, bless his heart, was like, "Son, we're gonna get you to the right doctor. So he's gonna take good care of you."
I'm not gonna give you an answer.
Right. So then we were transferred to Augusta, stayed up there for almost a week, and went through the whole. I mean, he was in surgery that afternoon. Mm-hmm. And I remember sitting in the waiting room and the doctors coming out and showing pictures of the X-ray and of the hand, and this is what we're doing. This is what we're about to do. This is what is going to happen as a result of this, physical therapy, a mental change, a physical change, all these things that are associated with amputees. And that was that. So lost, and coming from an industry where you make a living with your hands, and a man who provides for his family with his hands, is an incredible emotional barrier when you no longer have all 10 of those fingers.
Yeah.
So it took, in all honesty, he won't admit it, but he still struggles with the emotional aspect of that, and things that he could do at one point he can't do anymore, and things that he has to rely on other people to help him do, or and he's mastered some things. He can put a nut on a bolt with his pinky and his thumb. Like, I don't know many people that can, so he's figured out ways to work around it. But that kind of capped off our year and a half of trauma between
That was a heck of a good year and a half.
Yeah. So between losing our son, our little girl being born prematurely, and then losing his hands, I think that for us has cemented what we're doing and why we're doing it, and it has also been the foundation of the culture for our company and the kind of people that we want to hire, the kind of people that we want to develop and employ, the families that we want to support. So, it all goes back to our faith and our belief system and how we treat people, how we expect to be treated in return, the language we use, the conversations we have, the way we share our love with other people. All of that has influenced that, and all of the decisions that we make as a business. So, yeah.
So just going off of that, what has it been like for you physically losing him? Like,
I'm a very independent person. Bailage and stuff like that. We in the South we have dew at night, so humidity's high, so we don't get to bale dry hay on into night, and a lot of things like that. So there'd be a lot of days where, whether it was cutting hay or I say the baling piece, because you bale on into the night, or you're wrapping hay on into the night. I couldn't use my left hand or I could use my left arm, but even the nerves going down my forearm was still at a point where you couldn't hold a roll of net wrap, you couldn't hold a roll of sun film, you couldn't hold anything like that really. You had to figure out how to do it one-handed. And for me, that figuring out piece, it happened at the end of last fall, one of the last cuttings of the year. Up until then, I had to call someone to help me do something. And on the bad days, that was bad. It was real bad. And even to this day, like, a guy's out on the fence business, fence crew, I'll go out there and, try to help get along and try to help do. Well, I used to be able to, happened a year ago, at the age of 25, I could probably outwork most, I could outwork 4 20-year-olds, four people my same age. I could outwork them. I can still do that, just not in the same aspects.
Yep.
We prayed a lot, and I still continue to pray a lot. The good Lord probably judges me pretty hard when I hit it the wrong way, or like a couple of weeks ago, I hit it with a hammer, trying to drive a staple in a fence.
Are you right-handed?
I am right-handed.
Okay, so at least you got that.
Oh yeah, and this is on the left hand.
You know that's the well, a few things. The doctor in Augusta, I think he probably realized pretty quick that I wasn't a quitter. I had a good attitude about it, and hadn't gotten to where we are today because of having a poor attitude or not keeping good spirits about anything and everything. But the therapist, physical therapist, wanted me to get a prosthetic, and I see a lot of veterans living here where we're at. We're 30 minutes. The farm's 30 minutes from a military base. So living here, I got to grow up along side of a lot of folks that had lost limbs and all in the military and had prosthetics and things like that. And grew up with a gentleman that lost his whole, on his left hand, lost everything but his thumb. It was flat across right there. Where your thumb comes into your hand, it was flat across where it got lost in the cotton gin. So, I was able to watch those folks adapt, from when I was younger. But, of course, you don't ever think of anything like that. But the prosthetic piece, and seeing those military folks and past vets and all that had prosthetics, I never, since this happened, that wasn't really anything on my mind. My mind was trying to figure out how to be able to use it. Mm-hmm. And the physical therapist, she convinced me that I needed to go get a prosthetic, and thank the good Lord for good insurance. The prosthetic that we ended up going with was $26,000. And used to, the most expensive thing I carried in my truck console was my pistol.
Yeah.
And now it's a $25,000 prosthetic that I'm scared to use because it velcros around your wrist. So I'm scared now of trying to wear it and do anything, and something grab a hold of it and pull me the rest of the way in.
Yeah.
But it's been an adjustment, and like Becca said, I'm still adjusting. There's still days that it hurts a lot, and you just fight through it. You keep your eye on the goal and keep working forward. I did get a pretty cool hang 10 sign.
An emoji.
Apple made my own emoji.
Yeah.
So I sign all my texts now with a little emoji, little hang 10 symbol there.
Yeah. We did have one of my produce customers did tell us at one point, shortly after this, he said, well, I don't know many good quality farmers that aren't missing any limbs or anything. And so we got a good laugh out of that, because then he holds his hand up and is missing some nubs also.
Yeah.
So, there's some humor in it too.
Yeah.
I have a lot more fun with it now, like the whole nose picking piece, sitting in a restaurant and the kid be sitting over there. I'll do it sometimes to an adult just to get a laugh out of it. But you stick it up there like you're picking your nose and pull it out and act like it's gone and you didn't know it. That's pretty good too.
Yeah.
Well,
that's good. Looking for the fun part of it.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I've got one more question, but I got anything else you guys want to add before we get to that?
Just another thing on the advice piece, me and Becca strive really hard on being active within our industry, being active. We're involved in so much and so broad. You've got the forage piece, you've got the beef cattle piece, which ties back into the state associations and NCBA and things like that. But Farm Bureau and all of those groups and advocacy groups. Excuse me.
That is a tough word.
But all of those groups are here to help. But the most important piece for us is that we can go and we can learn. We can go and further our education to where we can better ourselves, our employees, our industries as a whole. And the day that you quit learning is a bad day. You need to always make sure that you continue to learn.
Sorry.
You need to make sure that you can continue to learn
Yeah.
and continue to grow within yourself and within your industry.
Mm-hmm.
I got nothing.
Well, I want to say thank you guys so much for having me out. It was a blast. You guys have been amazing.
Thank
This is
you.
great.
Thanks for coming.
I want to definitely look forward to coming back here in 3-4 years and doing this again and see where you guys
Yes, yeah.
are. But I've got to ask finally,
Mm-hmm.
what went through your head when you got an email from a guy in Minnesota that wanted to come and talk to you about beef cattle?
My first thought was, cool, a podcast. I love podcasts. And Jarrod was like, what?
So I guess the thing with me is and I wanted to ask you this too, but
Yeah.
I'm always curious now from the farmers market side, or when people call the butcher facility or the fence company and want something done or purchase meat. How did you hear about us?
Yeah.
And that's the first thing that goes through my mind is someone all the way up in Minnesota has heard about us, and that's huge for us. But for a South Georgia boy that grew up working hard and trying to make something happen every day, that's pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I have a friend that works with. I have a friend from college. I went to the school. I went to the University of Minnesota,
Okay.
and I have a friend that works for the Georgia Pecan Association.
Okay.
And so I called her up and I said, "This is what I'm doing," and she said, "I got a couple names for you,"
Mm-hmm.
and you were one of them.
Perfect.
Awesome.
So
Awesome. That
Yeah.
networking piece.
networking is everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
So
Well, we're glad you came.
I'm so
Glad you
glad
saw.
you guys showed me around. This was awesome. This was great. You guys are amazing, and you guys are gonna do amazing things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for that, thanks, guys. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed listening to Jarrod and Becca as much as I enjoyed interviewing them. Like I said, they're a young, fun couple that have a lot of drive and motivation, and I think that for them, the sky is definitely the limit. And I'm excited to see what they do in the future, and we'll definitely stay in contact and hopefully have them on the podcast again in a couple of years here. Before I go, I got to say thank you to everybody that downloaded and listened to the last episode. It's very neat to see everybody doing that and getting behind what I'm doing. And on top of that, liking everything I'm doing on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So keep that up, please. Share it, like it, do all that. I really appreciate it. And also, I should have my website done here in the next few days and get that out and get that live. So once again, thanks everybody for listening and liking everything. I really appreciate it. And if you can't decide what to eat tonight, why don't you pull some beef out of that freezer and throw it on the grill? I don't think you'll be disappointed at all. So have a good one. Talk to you soon. Thanks.